Hello and welcome to episode 6, Her Finance Talk. My name is Sue Diamond and I'm your host. And our goal is to help women create a better relationship with their money so you can live your best life. Thanks for joining us and investing in your financial well-being. Her Finance Talk is brought to you by the Her Finance Club, and our mission is to socialize the idea that it's okay for women to talk about money because knowledge is power. And when that knowledge helps you become more independent, it translates to empowerment. Women empowering women is a mantra we love to live by, and one that has helped to inspire women for decades. Where would we be without each other? So let me introduce our guest today, Dana Davis, who is a senior human resource consultant. She's a change leader and founder of Forward Focused HR Solutions. With more than 20 years of experience in corporate settings, Dana has provided strategic human resource partnerships for notable organizations such as Nordstrom, Blue Cross, and Comcast. Specializing in change management and effective communication, Dana is passionate about helping individuals and teams understand and embrace diverse communication styles to become more effective communicators and reach their greatest potential in an ever-changing business environment. She's a graduate of Western Washington University and credits her time spent abroad in Europe and the Middle East for developing her multicultural mindset. And today's topic is, what will be the future of working women in a post-pandemic world? So welcome, Dana. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much, Susan. Thanks for having me on today.
So I've been thinking a lot about this moment that we're currently in, which is causing a lot of us to kind of feel like we're at a new beginning, or it's a chapter break, if you will. And in the way that we think about our lives, it's causing a lot of extra reflection, a lot of extra change. And of course, we've seen, people switching jobs, moving to new communities, and stepping back from work. So in this, I guess, ever-changing, environment, I'm looking at what's next for women with work from home being kind of the new norm for the past year. And the question out there is to kind of our listeners, what did you learn over the last year? What did you learn about your current job? What works for you? What doesn't work for you? And how do you parlay into what's next? But before we delve into capitalizing on your expertise, Dana, I would love to open the conversation or open it up and have you share about your story and how you've transitioned and pivoted during COVID and started your own business, and a little bit about your personal background for our listeners on how you ended up where you are today.
Okay, thank you so much. Yeah, my story is probably not unlike many other stories coming out of the pandemic. There was a lot of shifts and changes in the business environment. Companies were having to make decisions on the fly about how to restructure their workforce, how to prepare their workforce from working from home. And I ended up leaving a company that I was with for, over 9 years. And really had an opportunity to step back and say, okay, what are the things that I enjoyed about my work life? And I had always enjoyed helping people and oftentimes helped people outside of my structured work world. So my idea of starting a consulting company had actually started 3 years prior, and this just opened up a window for me to go through and really focus on that. So during my time of transition is when I built out the framework for Forward Focused HR Solutions, and really just wanting to focus on that exact thing that we're talking about today. What do you do to look forward? What is next? How are you planning your next move as far as your career goes? So I'm thrilled to be able to help individuals, specifically women. I like the idea of empowering women to, optimize their career, goals as well. So, um, and I really enjoy having conversations such as this. So thanks for having me.
Oh, you're very welcome. So I know I too, during the course of COVID, and the listeners have heard this too, that was a transitioning period for me, and kind of thinking about some of my values, and how I tied that into helping me make a decision and pivot. So we know that, as you've mentioned, the workplace entered the home like what, 15, 16 months ago, and women themselves were saddled with not only juggling office work, but with managing households and childcare and education on top of that. And now, post pandemic, we know that businesses are going to be relying on us to be energized and motivated, to help them achieve what their, growth agenda is. And just based on some of the women that I've been speaking to lately, some of them just simply aren't mentally or physically ready to kind of hit the ground running. And I know a part of this is, some mention, it's due to kind of burnout, as the lines between work and home have all but dissolved
Right.
during the pandemic. And then others are still saying, you know what, I don't know if I can give it my full attention until I know the schools are going to be fully reopened in September, because we really don't know what's going to
Right.
happen. We're hoping now, everybody's getting vaccinated, but then we have all these strains, that, we can get back to somewhat of a normal routine, especially with the kids in school, but women are still worried about that. And I'm also hearing from other women, um, since working from home, it's the best thing that they never knew they always wanted.
Right.
So, just in terms of, from your perspective and working with businesses, are you seeing businesses tweak the policies to help women in a post-pandemic world? And has the mental bias towards, I guess, working from home gone away?
Well, I think that businesses are looking at, what does work look like when people return to the work environment, and not just for women but for everyone.
Right.
I see a trend of, talking about a hybrid workforce. Maybe we're going to work in the office 2 or 3 days a week, or in order to kind of build that team environment. And naturally they do need to consider how women are going to fit into that equation. One of the recent women in workplace studies noted that of the like 1.1 million people that left the workforce during the pandemic, 80% of those were women. And a lot of that was attributed to you know childcare and managing school from a home environment. And so I think all of those things are being put on the table and reevaluated at this point, as businesses are looking at how do we bring our workforce back, and what does the new face of an office look like, what does work look like going forward. So I think everything is being considered at this point.
Have you seen any expansion on mental health support? I mean, I know a lot of companies have offered outside supports on a smaller scale in the past. If somebody was dealing with, I don't know, performance issues or something like
Mhm.
that, but just based on what we know is happening, and it obviously it's impacting everybody, but I think more so women than anybody else. Have you seen an expansion on the mental health support?
I think that mental health is over the last years have been incorporated in a company's benefits package when you're working with an organization. So I think that it was always there, or for many organizations was there, but perhaps not fully utilized. And what I've seen is, the prevalence in it being okay to talk about, I need support. Whereas before, I think women were hesitant to say, I need some help because I'm trying to manage issues at home, or, I have child having struggling in school. What I've seen during this last year is that there's a shift now where it's less concerning for a woman to raise their hand and saying, look, I need a little bit more flexibility here, because I'm having some mental health issues either at home with my child or stress for myself, and being able to reach out for that support.
So I know I heard mentioned the past year has prompted, many women employees to kind of reconsider their values. I know that was something that I needed to do, and or make major changes in their personal lives,
Mhm.
which is changing how they work and what they need to do to be productive. So, can we talk a little bit about women and some of the big decisions that I know many of us are facing right now, particularly when it comes to work? Many of us, have to decide what we want our new working lives to look like as we're kind of coming out of this pandemic. And what best what's your best advice for women who are on the cusp of a career transition, who may be unsure of where to go from here, to when they're thinking about how to maximize their health and their sanity and happiness and all those types of choices?
Right, right. I think in any change or any transition, it's an opportunity to reevaluate what's working and what's not working. And certainly
Right.
women have done that throughout this pandemic, and looked at their, work life and said, decided, maybe I don't want to work the 50-hour work week. Maybe working from home, I can be more productive and still have more of an integration with my family. So I think, the first step is really getting clear and having a lot of clarity on what it is you do want your work life to look like going forward. Um, and then taking steps to kind of create that for yourself. Obviously, if you can have conversations with your current employer and they're allowing a certain level of flexibility, that's a great place to start. If you don't feel that that flexibility is there, or that that work environment is going to work for you going forward, then you really need to make some, decisions about how you're going to move forward. And, are you going to start looking for another organization or another role, or, start your own company to provide yourself with that little bit of flexibility? And all of those things are negotiation points when you go back
Right.
into the workforce.
Yeah, I know that I think it was, I don't know whether it was through Fidelity, though there was a new study, and it was showing that 1 in 3 professionals, women, which I think was about 34%, currently working from home because of the health pandemic, would look for a new job if required to be back in the office full
Hmm.
time.
Hmm.
So, I think, as you say, kind of looking at what's important. So, if if you work for a company that is done offering flexibility, what are your options? And I think, as you say, you have to apply your values and determine what your true needs are, right,
Right,
before making any big decisions or rational
right,
decisions to say, right, you know what, I'm leaving this job right now, and looking at, I guess, opportunities, and also maybe, understanding the cost opportunity, right? Because if you decide that one option for you is to return to work on a staggered or hybrid schedule, then the score for health and safety might be high, but you might score low on team collaboration and communication, since there
right.
won't be as much overlap between colleagues. But if you're still working from home for part of the week, I think, like you'd said, companies are looking at that hybrid, that might be a win-win situation for all involved. But I think, just to add to it, evaluate, choose, and then sleep on it. Work through your list objectively as you come to a decision, because for me, it's always really important to sleep on something, because that's one of the things that I see when we're stressed out. We tend to make we're not rational in our decision making because our emotions are
Right.
playing heavily in there, and it's like we gotta take time and sleep on it, and then come back to it when it comes to making those decisions. So and for myself, I found that I think with COVID, I've been teetering. You had mentioned that you'd been thinking about starting your own business for 3 years.
Right.
And I had been going back and forth about starting my financial coaching business. But, I would, it'd be like, oh, I don't know if I'm quite ready to do that yet. Ebbs and flows and looking at positions when you've got money coming in. But that's where I kind of looked at what I valued most, what was important to me, and then weighed the pros and cons against that. And that's what was, I guess, very helpful for me, knowing what I value and what I'm interested in and applying those values. So, if you're not sure which way you want
Right.
to go, it's like thinking about, what's important to you, and then looking, at your family's needs and interests as well as your own.
Right.
So, oh, sorry, were you going to
No,
say
that's okay.
something?
I think that in this and any other change for that matter, I've often said, it's important to step back and find the opportunity in the change. Many people get rattled or not sure what they're going to do next, and maybe focus on the negatives of change. It tends to have some negative connotation, but there's always an opportunity in the change if you step back and look at it. And like you said, assess your needs, assess your values, and there may be a new opportunity just waiting out there for you to to seize and move forward.
Right. Yeah, and I think it's as we think about our own personal values and applying it with work, I think the other side to look at is, if you want to continue working from home and don't want to find a new employer, then, I for me, the other option would be, how can I show my boss what I've been able to accomplish while I'm away from the office? Because we also have, you don't have the travel time, so you have more productive time at home, which actually makes puts you in a better place and prepared for your work environment. So, if you're a person who can be more productive or as productive, then, if you can prove that and give examples of projects completed on time or early, or show how losing your commute has meant more hours spent on
Right.
work projects at home, then I think that, demonstrating that success can happen from, you know, a
Right.
cube on the farm.
Right. I also think that absolutely being able to show projects that you've completed successfully or productivity, but equally as important is how were you connected to your team? How did
Mm,
you find ways to communicate and stay connected to your team or to your manager so that it filled that gap that we're experiencing about not being in person with one another, because you need a certain element of that in a team to make better projects and make better decisions within the organization. So creating that balance and being able to also, speak to that. Not only have I been able to complete XYZ projects, but I also had very effective work sessions with my teammates via Zoom in order to do that.
right, right. I think the other side is just touching upon, because certainly I'm focused on women, creating a better relationship with their money. And, as you consider your job, as we just mentioned, it's not a rash decision, because as you weigh everything else, one of the key things is, can you afford to leave your job? So outside of, looking at, I think sometimes if you want to look for another job, you're always in a better position when you have a job to
Right.
transition. You're stronger in the job market when you have another job. But I think if it becomes a danger to your health and you're suffering from heart problems and anxiety issues, then it's not worth staying. So,
Right.
you know, it, it, if you're in a toxic environment or in a toxic job, then, you'll feel much better if you're not in that situation. But again, you know, balancing your budget and looking, you
Right.
may have to make some cuts there in terms of, having to transition for a month. But, if you have your emergency fund in place, then,
Yes.
this is what I always say. We know if anything has taught us that we definitely need an emergency fund is COVID. But I think the other thing that it also allows for is, if you are stressed or you're in a toxic environment and you can't health wise or emotionally stay in that job while you look for another one, then, having an emergency fund gives you the luxury to be able to do that.
Right. Right. Absolutely. And the there is no price on keeping your health, right? There are many stressful jobs that can create health issues if you maintain in that job. And change is scary. Change is always scary, particularly if you've been in an organization for a long time, to find the courage to step out and say, okay, I need to do just something different for myself and for my family.
Right. So, do you have any, I guess, tips on if women are looking to transition outside of what you've mentioned when it comes to, I don't know, like a LinkedIn profile, the social media status, or resume writing? If there's some resources, or what should they be doing to kind
Right.
of make them, stand out, maybe?
Right, right. I think you mentioned all of them. I think all of those are tools that you would leverage, when you're starting to look for a new role. LinkedIn is very widely used in most organizations. So taking some time to, update your LinkedIn profile. The first step I always suggest for people to do is to change the privacy settings so that every time you make a change on your profile, you're not sending a message to everyone that you're connected with that you've made a change on
Right.
your profile. And then reaching out to people that you've worked with and asking them to, endorse you for particular skills, that you bring to the workplace. I think LinkedIn is the number one,
Mm.
resource that you can spend boosting your presence, your online presence, and really bringing forth uh, what you are good at and what you strive in, not just what you're currently doing, but oftentimes you need to shape that for what you want to do in the direction you want to go, not just a repeat of what you've been doing all along. Um, and then, letting your connections know, I'm looking for a new opportunity and please keep me in mind because, many of the connections you make in new job searches are, through referrals. You have a much better percentage, success rate, going through a referral process. So that's where I would certainly start is just kind of getting that word out. But making sure that you're very clear because people will ask you, what are you looking for in your next role? And you need to have your kind of your elevator pitch of what that's going to look like for you.
Right. I like LinkedIn because I think it's a great place because people that you've worked with can give you recommendations.
Hmm.
And it's like a live resume, isn't it? Just
Right.
to share with everybody. But I think also just to add to, and I come across this a lot in discussions with women, is that if they're identifying their skill set, I think to also remember that outside of your work environment, what if you've been educating your children, managing the household, and working from home, then project management certainly is a skill set there if you've been able to do that successfully. And I think sometimes as women, we don't tend to look at some of those skills that we demonstrate outside our immediate work environment that
Right.
can be applicable. So,
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. Taking into account, even, projects that you do within your community groups or the schools, when schools are in session, particularly when schools are out of session, all of those things, contribute to what your skill set looks like. And so
right.
taking all of those into account is important.
Well, thank you, Dana, for sharing your story and your
Yes.
expertise with our listeners. It's been a pleasure.
Thank
And
you.
where can our listeners find you?
Well, I am on LinkedIn, so you can always find me through LinkedIn, with my Dana Davis under my name. You can also find me at my website that's forwardfocusedhr.com. And you can send me a message at dana@forwardfocusedhr.com.
Okay, great. And you know what? I will make sure that I will post all that information in the show notes
Okay,
so our listeners can find you. So,
perfect.
again, thank you so much for your time. Much appreciated, Dana, and your expertise. And I also just want to take time to remind everyone Her Finance Talk is brought to you by the Her Finance Club. And our goal is to get 1 million women to start the money conversation with spouse, friends, or colleagues, because knowledge is power. And when that knowledge helps you become more independent, it translates to empowerment. So, thank you again to our listeners for taking time out of your busy schedules to join us. And don't forget to subscribe. And I love hearing from our listeners. So, please feel free to share comments. So, until our next episode, here's to your financial well being. Bye.